The desert town of Red Hollow rested quiet under the late afternoon sun, all dust, heat, and wood creaking in the wind. The kind of place where fortunes dried up as fast as riverbeds, and hope was something most folks used up long ago. But on this day, a young woman stood outside the town's tiny wooden clinic, clutching a worn shawl around her shoulders. Her name was Emily Carter, barely 20, but with a face that carried years of worry carved into lines of determination. Her little sister lay inside on a narrow cot, burning with fever. Emily wasn't thinking about the heat, the hunger in her belly, or the ache in her feet from walking miles. All she could think about was one thing. She didn't have enough money. The doctor had examined the girl and given his verdict. Medicine could save her, maybe even quickly, but the cost was more than Emily had in the world. She stood on the steps now, staring into the dusty street, terrified the doctor would come out and ask her the question she couldn't answer. Can you pay? She had tried everything: sewing, cleaning, taking in laundry, but even working herself sick from dawn to moonrise wasn't enough. Not in a town where the mines had shut down and the cattle herds had moved on. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Please, I can't lose her too." Footsteps approached behind her, not hurried, not heavy, just quiet and steady, like someone who wasn't in a rush to be anywhere. She turned slightly, just enough to see a man step onto the porch. He wasn't from Red Hollow. She knew every soul in this town. He was broad-shouldered, tall, with trail dust on his boots and a travel-worn hat shading steady gray eyes. A stranger, maybe just passing through. Their eyes met, only for a moment, and she looked away, embarrassed. Strangers had enough burdens of their own. She wouldn't beg one for help. The doctor came out just then, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Miss Carter," he said, voice gentle but tired. "I need to know." "I know," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I just need more time." The doctor hesitated, not unkind, but running a clinic wasn't free. Medicine cost money, and Emily had none. The stranger shifted slightly, watching. Emily felt his gaze but kept her head down, cheeks flushed with humiliation. Then the doctor sighed and said, "Someone already settled the bill." Emily looked up sharply. "What? No one." She turned slowly toward the stranger, who stood calmly, expression unreadable. He tipped his hat once. And Emily, for the first time in days, forgot the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. Emily stepped forward, confusion and relief mixing in her eyes, but the stranger held up a hand, kindly, not coldly. "No need for words, miss," he said, voice low and steady. The doctor nodded toward him. He paid for the consultation and the medicine. Enough for several days. Emily's throat tightened. She could barely make her voice work. "Sir, I don't know how to repay." "You don't owe me a thing," he said quietly. "Your sister needed help. That's all that matters." He spoke like a man to whom doing the right thing wasn't a favor, it was simply the way the world should work. He tipped his hat again, turning toward the steps. Emily blinked, overwhelmed. Good people were rare these days. Generosity rarer still. She hurried after him. "Please, at least tell me your name." He paused at the bottom of the steps, dust swirling around his boots in the wind. For a moment she wondered if he would ignore the question. But he didn't. "Name's Matthew Hale," he said, "just passing through." Then he glanced at the clinic door. "Stay with your sister. She needs you more than I do." Emily swallowed and whispered, "Matthew. Thank you." But before she could say more, he turned away and stepped into the long, dusty street, heading toward the livery as the sun dipped lower. A man who had done a kindness, and didn't even wait to be thanked. Emily stood on the steps watching him go, feeling something unusual for the first time in months. Hope. Inside, her little sister needed her, and she dashed back inside the clinic with tears she didn't have time to wipe away. Matthew Hale didn't look back. But fate had plans neither of them could see from these dusty streets. Emily sat beside her little sister Anna's bed long after the doctor left, gently brushing the girl's hair back from her fever-warmed forehead. The medicine was working. She could see it in Anna's slower breathing, the soft easing of pain around her eyes. Relief washed through Emily until her shoulders sagged. She had been so close to losing her. So close to feeling helpless all over again. But then, a stranger stepped in, paid a debt he didn't owe, and walked away without asking for anything. Emily stared at the small bottle of medicine on the nightstand, her fingers tightening around the cheap wooden chair. Matthew Hale. She repeated the name in her mind once, twice, until she was sure she wouldn't forget it. Good men didn't come along often, not in towns like Dry Creek, where everyone had already lost too much. And she wasn't about to let the world treat a good man's kindness like dust blown into the wind. She was going to repay him. Somehow. Before she could plan how, Anna stirred. The little girl whispered. Emily leaned close. I'm here, sweetheart. Anna forced a small smile. Did we have to pay the doctor? Emily hesitated, then shook her head. No, darling, someone helped us. Anna blinked, sleepy and confused. Like an angel? Emily's lips curved. Maybe something like that. Within minutes, Anna drifted back into medicine-heavy sleep, her breathing steadier, her little hand still clutching Emily's. The fear that had lived in Emily's chest for months finally loosened its grip. She stood, grabbed her shawl, and stepped outside. The clinic's lanterns glowed behind her as she hurried down the street. The livery. That's where he'd gone. She moved quickly, boots crunching on gravel, refusing to let him disappear before she at least thanked him properly. When she pushed open the livery door, the warm scent of hay and horse filled the air. A stable boy looked up. Seen a traveler come through? Tall, black hat, brown coat? The boy nodded. Sure, he's renting a stall for the night. Just finishing up in the back. Emily let out a breath, and headed toward the lamplight at the far end of the building. She wasn't sure what she'd say. But one thing she knew. No one had ever done something so selfless for her and Anna. And she wasn't going to let him vanish without returning even a piece of that grace. Emily slowed as she approached the last stall, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. Matthew Hale was there, quietly brushing down a chestnut mare. He worked with the calm focus of a man who had spent years doing everything with his own two hands. No wasted motion, no impatience, no need to be seen. He didn't hear her approach until her boots scuffed a bit of straw beneath them. He turned, surprised, and Emily froze for a moment, realizing she had no grand speech prepared. No practiced words, just raw gratitude lodged in her chest. Mr. Hale, she managed, trying to steady her voice. I came to thank you. He blinked, almost uncomfortable, and shook his head. You don't owe me thanks, Miss Bennett. Your sister needed help. I had the means to provide it. That's all. Emily took a small step closer. No, she insisted gently. That isn't all. People around here, they don't help unless they stand to gain something. And you walked in and paid a debt without even knowing our names. His jaw flexed at that, but he kept his eyes down, checking a buckle on the saddle as if hoping the conversation might simply dissolve. Emily let out a breath. You won't even look at me, she whispered. At that, Matthew finally paused, hands still, head lifting just enough to meet her gaze. His eyes were a quiet storm, tired, guarded, carrying heavy things he wasn't ready to speak aloud. Miss Bennett, he said softly, sometimes a man does a decent thing because he's failed at 1,000 worse. The words caught her off guard. Failed? At what? Before she could ask, he gave the mare one last pat and moved to hang the brush on a nearby hook. I'm not looking for gratitude, he continued. And I have no interest in being anyone's hero. Emily swallowed. Well, I have interest in thanking one, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Matthew froze again, and this time, she saw the faintest flicker of emotion in his expression. Regret, loneliness, something deeply human. But a heartbeat later, he shut it all away and reached for his coat. You should get back to your sister, he said gently. She'll need you when she wakes. Emily felt the words in their layers, concern, distance, and a refusal to let anyone get close. She nodded once, but she wasn't done. Mr. Hale? She asked quietly as he stepped toward the door. He glanced back. I'm not going to forget what you did. Matthew stopped for just a moment, the lantern light catching the edge of his jaw. Then he tipped his hat in a small, almost reluctant gesture and walked out into the night. Emily stood there, alone in the quiet livery, her heart determined. This man wasn't the type to accept thanks. So she'd have to find another way to repay him. Matthew was already up before sunrise the next morning, the way he always was, Work started early on the Hale property, and it didn't end until there was no light left to see by. He hauled feed sacks, mended fencing, and checked the water troughs, doing it all with the quiet discipline of a man who needed motion more than rest. Work, after all, didn't ask questions. Work didn't expect him to talk. Work didn't look at him like he might still be worth saving. He just knelt to tighten a loose gate hinge when the crunch of wagon wheels drifted up the lane. He paused, turning just enough to see a small farm cart rumbling into the yard. Emily Bennett was driving it. He exhaled slowly, already feeling the weight of a conversation he wasn't ready for. She hopped down before the cart had even fully stopped, skirts lifted just enough to keep them from the mud. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, but there was determination in her eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Hale," she said, breathless but steady. He stood, dusting his hands off. "Miss Bennett." There was a pause. She had that look, the one that told him she had something more than polite greetings on her mind. So he braced himself. "I brought something for you," she said. Matthew frowned. "You didn't need to." But she was already climbing back into the cart, lifting a small crate into her arms. He stepped forward automatically to take it from her, sturdy, always ready to carry what others couldn't. The weight surprised him. Fresh apples. Still crisp from cold storage, rare this time of year, and valuable for anyone struggling to make ends meet. Emily dusted her hands and folded them in front of her. "You paid for the doctor," she said. "We wanted to pay you back, even a little." Matthew stared at the box as though it were something fragile. "Or dangerous." "You shouldn't have spent good food on me," he said quietly. "You've got enough burdens as it is." Emily shook her head. "These aren't charity, they're gratitude. Just, small gratitude." He swallowed, the words catching somewhere deep. No one had given him anything in a long time. People came to Matthew Hale the way they went to the general store, only when they needed something. Emily continued, softer now. "My sister woke this morning. She asked the doctor who saved her life. When I told her your name, she said to tell you, thank you, herself, as soon as she's strong enough to stand." Matthew felt his lungs tighten. He set the crate down slowly at his feet, then rested both hands on the wooden fence behind him, grounding himself. "Miss Bennett," he said with a strained breath, "you don't owe me a thing. Not apples. Not thanks." Emily stepped closer. "Maybe not, but you didn't ask what we owed you before you helped us, did you?" That landed, not as an accusation, but as truth. He looked away. "I helped because it was the right thing," he muttered. Emily smiled just a little. "And this is the right thing for us." Matthew didn't bring the apples inside right away. Instead, he carried the crate to the barn, setting it gently on an old wooden shelf as though it were something that might break. He stood there for a moment, staring at them, rubbing the back of his neck like a man trying to make sense of a language he'd forgotten how to speak. A small voice drifted from behind him. "You don't usually get presents." Matthew turned. Ben, the blacksmith's boy he sometimes took on odd jobs, stood in the doorway with a bundle of fence nails under one arm. Barefoot, dusty, quick-eyed, Ben had a face that had seen too much but hadn't given up yet. Matthew raised an eyebrow. "You been spying on me again?" Ben shrugged unapologetically. "The road's right there. Hard not to see a wagon stop in your yard." Matthew huffed through his nose, which for him was the closest thing to a laugh. The boy set the nails down and walked over to the crate, peering into it. "Those look real good." "They're fresh," Matthew said. "From the Bennett farm." Ben's eyebrows shot up. "The ones with the sick sister?" Matthew nodded once. The boy's face shifted, respect, understanding, something quieter. "So you paid the doctor," Ben murmured. "Knew it wasn't magic." Matthew said nothing. Ben kicked at the straw on the floor, thinking. Most folks rail at God when times get bad. You just keep helping people, even when nobody sees. Matthew stiffened slightly. "It's not something worth talking about." Ben tilted his head. "But maybe worth being seen." Matthew tried to brush the words off. "Go fetch the hammer. Fence won't fix itself." Ben grinned and darted off. But the boy's last words hung in the air like dust in sunbeams. Maybe worth being seen. Not something Matthew believed. Not yet. He went back to work outside, chopping fallen wood and hauling it to the splitting block. The rhythmic swing of the axe helped steady his thoughts. But then a wagon rolled up again, not Emily this time, but Dr. Finch, leaning on his cane, spectacled eyes sharp despite his age. Matthew groaned under his breath. He hated attention more than debt collectors. The doctor climbed down with surprising steadiness. "Afternoon, Hale." Matthew wiped sweat from his brow. "Doctor." Finch looked him over as though assessing a patient. "You could have told me it was you who paid the bill." Matthew frowned. "No reason to." "Plenty of reason," the doctor countered. "People deserve to know who stood up for them." Matthew's jaw tightened. "They were in trouble. I helped. That's the beginning and end of it." Finch studied him for a long, quiet moment before speaking. "You're a good man, Matthew Hale. Your father would be proud." Matthew froze. Not because the words were harsh, but because they were the kind he never heard. The next morning broke slow and silver, the prairie still wrapped in mist. Matthew Hale was already up, boot heels on the floor before the rooster even cleared his throat. Work didn't wait, not for tired bones, empty memories, or wandering thoughts. He stepped outside, intent on heading to the east field, and stopped. Something sat on the porch steps. A small wicker basket, neatly wrapped in a scrap of checked cloth. Steam still curled faintly from the corner, meaning whoever left it hadn't been gone long. Matthew looked up the empty lane, scanning the early dawn. No wagon, no rider, no sign of the person responsible. Just soft light drifting over the wheat and the sound of a meadowlark waking the world. He crouched, lifted the cloth. Fresh biscuits. Still warm. A little folded note rested on top. His stomach tightened, not with irritation, but with something far more dangerous. Hope. He unfolded it carefully. For someone who didn't have to help, but did anyway. Matthew closed his eyes. Emily Bennett had left this. A woman who had nothing, who should have been resting, sleeping, healing, helping her sick sister, was baking biscuits at sunrise for the man who paid their doctor bill. He sat down on the porch step, elbows on his knees, staring at the small basket like it was something holy. Because to him, it was. Giving had always come easy. Being thanked? That was harder. He took a biscuit, breaking it in half. It was flaky, buttery, better than anything he'd had in years. He ate slowly, like someone afraid it might disappear if he blinked. Footsteps crunched on the path behind him. Ben, the blacksmith's boy, approached, hair sticking up, shirt half buttoned, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Are those," he sniffed, "real biscuits?" Matthew swallowed. "Looks that way." Ben whistled low. "Must be nice, having folks bring you food." Matthew looked sideways at him. "You hungry?" Ben hesitated, trying to play it cool. "Maybe." Matthew tossed him one. The boy caught it, grinning like a puppy who'd just been handed a steak. "Who's it from?" Ben asked through a mouthful. Matthew folded the note and slipped it into his pocket. "No one who owes me anything." Ben stopped chewing for a moment, studying him. "You know, you're allowed to let people care about you." Matthew snorted. "Get that fence rail before I change my mind." Ben laughed and took off running. Matthew watched him go, then looked back down the lane, still empty, still quiet. He hadn't seen Emily arriving, but somehow, he'd felt her. He stood, lifting the basket and heading inside to wash up. As he passed the small kitchen table, clean, simple, bare, he set the basket carefully in the center. For years that table had symbolized loneliness. By mid-morning, the sun had climbed high enough to burn away the last tendrils of mist. Matthew Hale was out in the orchard, checking the fence line, when he heard the faint clip-clop of hooves against the dirt lane. He straightened instinctively, squinting toward the horizon. A rider approached, tall and deliberate, the familiar outline of Emily Bennett clearly visible even from a distance. She reined in her horse at the yard gate, boots clicking against the wooden boards as she dismounted with the practiced ease of someone who had spent her life in the saddle. Matthew felt an odd tightness in his chest. Anticipation? Unease? He wasn't sure. "Good morning, Mr. Hale," she called over, voice steady, carrying a warmth that seemed to fill the crisp morning air. "Miss Bennett," he replied, nodding cautiously. "You've been busy." Emily's eyes scanned the orchard, the cabin, the neat stacks of wood, everything that spoke of the man's solitary diligence. "I thought I'd check on the work you asked done yesterday," she said, producing a small notebook. "And to see how you were holding up." Matthew's brow furrowed slightly. "I manage." She stepped closer, careful not to invade the space he valued. "I know," she said softly. "But I also know no one does it all alone." He set down his rake, feeling the pull of something he'd long resisted. Connection, care, responsibility beyond the land itself. Emily handed him the notebook. Inside were lists, measurements, reminders, details she'd recorded while the doctor worked on her sister. She'd thought ahead for him, anticipating his needs, carrying the burdens of others alongside her own. Matthew's fingers brushed hers as he took the book. The contact was brief, electric, yet grounding all at once. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly, meeting her gaze. "Because you didn't ask for thanks," Emily replied, "but someone should know what you did. Someone should see it, and I want to be the one who does." The orchard seemed to grow quieter, the wind pausing as if listening to their words. Matthew's lips parted, but no sound came. Emily smiled, not teasingly, not playfully, simply with recognition. She understood, perhaps more than anyone, the way he had carried the weight of his choices. "I'll leave you to your work," she said, stepping back, "but I'll check in tomorrow." She mounted her horse and, with a gentle nudge of the reins, disappeared down the lane. Matthew remained still, eyes following her, heart stubbornly catching on something tender, unfamiliar. For the first time in years, he realized that the world hadn't forgotten him. That someone had chosen to notice. And deep in the orchard, with the sun spilling gold across the trees, Matthew Hale understood something simple but profound. He wasn't alone. The sun had dipped behind the distant hills, leaving long shadows that stretched across the orchard like whispered secrets. Matthew Hale sat on the edge of the porch, legs dangling, hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee. The quiet of the evening pressed against him, not the oppressive silence he'd grown used to, but a softer, gentler hush that made him aware of the empty spaces he'd long tried to ignore. He thought of Emily. The way she had arrived that morning, purposeful, patient, her eyes scanning every corner of the yard as if she carried a map not just of the land, but of him. The small basket of biscuits, the note tucked neatly inside, and the way she had left without ceremony, letting him stew in the ache of anticipation. Matthew had spent the day moving through tasks mechanically, checking fences, stacking wood, tending the small vegetable patch, but every hammer strike, every rustle of leaves, echoed with her presence. He set the mug down and leaned forward, elbows on knees, gaze fixed on the horizon where the prairie met the twilight. Had he been waiting for her all along? The thought was unsettling, yet it pulled at something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Something tender, something hopeful. The porch creaked behind him, and he turned slightly, expecting the wind, but found the children, Ben and little Clara, peeking through the doorway, sleepy-eyed and whispering. "Are you thinking about her?" Ben asked bluntly, as only a child could. Matthew's lips pressed into a thin line. "Maybe." Clara nodded knowingly. "She's nice," she whispered. He gave them a small, wry smile, the kind that held more feeling than words ever could. "Yes, she is." The children slipped back inside, leaving Matthew alone with the soft sigh of the evening. He rested his chin on his hands, considering how life had changed in just a few days. The weight of solitude that had clung to him for so long now seemed less suffocating, less permanent. He thought of Emily's smile, the careful kindness in her gestures, the way she had chosen to see him, not just his work, not just his quiet exterior, but the man beneath. Matthew realized then that the stirrings in his chest were no longer just fleeting warmth, they were the beginnings of something deeper. Something he hadn't dared name but felt in every beat of his heart. As darkness settled over the ranch, he whispered to the wind, almost as if admitting it aloud would make it real. "Maybe it's time to let someone in." And for the first time in years, he didn't feel fear. He felt possibility. The first light of morning crept slowly over the horizon, washing the prairie in soft gold and amber. Matthew Hale stepped onto the porch, boots crunching on the dew-laden grass, and breathed deeply, savoring the crisp air. The scent of earth, the faint perfume of wildflowers, the distant clatter of horses in the neighboring fields, it all felt alive, promising, as if the world itself had shifted overnight. He carried a small basket of fresh bread, intending to leave it on the porch for Emily as a quiet gesture of thanks. But when he reached the gate, he paused, sensing rather than seeing her presence. There she stood, bridle in hand, the morning sun catching in her hair, casting a halo of light around her figure. Emily smiled gently. "Good morning, Matthew." He returned the smile, a warmth spreading through his chest that he hadn't known he was capable of feeling again. "Morning, Miss Bennet." For a few moments, they simply watched each other, the quiet stretching between them like the prairie itself, wide, open, full of unspoken possibilities. Emily stepped closer, her eyes bright with something deeper than gratitude. "I wanted to thank you for everything," she said softly. "Not just for helping my sister, but for showing me that kindness still exists in this world." Matthew swallowed. The words he wanted to say caught somewhere between caution and hope. Finally, he lifted the basket toward her. "I think you deserve more than thanks," he admitted. "You deserve to see what good can grow from the choices we make together." Her hand brushed against his as she took the basket, and for the first time, he didn't pull away. Their fingers lingered, a touch that carried a promise unspoken but understood. Emily's smile deepened. "I'd like that," she whispered. Matthew nodded, heart steady now, sure of what he had felt creeping into his life these past days, the slow, insistent pull of trust, of companionship, of something he had long denied himself. Love. The sun rose fully, spilling light across the fields, gilding the orchard, the cabin, and the small path leading to the barn. It was a new day, and for Matthew Hale, it was not just another sunrise, it was a beginning. A beginning that included Emily, her sister, and a future he could finally embrace without hesitation. He extended his hand toward her, and she took it. Together, they stepped toward the porch, toward the kitchen where warmth and laughter awaited, toward a life rebuilt from compassion and courage. The prairie stretched endlessly before them, open and vast, but no longer lonely. With the soft clatter of the horse in the barnyard and the smell of fresh bread lingering in the air, Matthew realized something he hadn't allowed himself to hope for. He was home, and he was ready to live again. And in that quiet dawn, the promise of tomorrow felt certain, full, and utterly bright.